Flooding in BC has devastated parts of the province, forcing evacuations as atmospheric rivers drench the southwest parts of the province. Floods in Calgary and High River, Alberta in 2013 forced Paul Droogers to evacuate his home with his family as pastor of High River Christian Reformed Church. He saw what it took for a community to rebuild. Thank you, Pastor Paul, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You had to hurriedly pack your family up as flooding moved in quick. What was that like to leave most of your belongings, not knowing what would happen? And how, as you're watching what's happening in BC, how can you relate to what you're seeing as we all watch this on the news every evening?
Yeah, I think as I watch the images coming out of British Columbia, I'm reminded of just a sheer sense of anxiety and great unsettling. My little boy, my middle son, was standing at the front door and he was watching the river water come up the street. And after a while, he started turning around and saying, "Daddy, Daddy, the water is hurting my feelings. It's hurting my feelings." And yeah, it cut really deep to that feeling of being out of control and not knowing what's happening. And as I look at the images coming out of British Columbia, there's a real sense, of course, that those folks are also experiencing things being so out of control and just not really knowing where they're at, where they might be going, or when they might be able to return.
Yeah. What are some of the recovery needs that you know will be needed in the coming weeks, months, years, as these communities finally get above water in BC?
I think one of the things that we experienced in High River was, though we were front page news the first day, we were back page news about the second or third day, and we were no news about a week in. And definitely a level of awareness, I think, is super important for the people in British Columbia to know that people around the country are continually thinking for them. And as that awareness is still there, and as the images are still before us, our thoughts tend to go to the people who are affected, and we tend to look for ways in which we might be able to reach out. I know there'll be great financial need. I know there will be great emotional need, spiritual need. I was chatting with a farmer here in southern Alberta last week who said that though finances, of course, is a great need as well, it would be maybe better for some of us to consider getting a truck together and loading that trailer full with animals and sending that to the farmers that are affected. And so I think every community is affected differently. People's needs in rebuilding will be different. And it might be important for us to have them tell their story and learn how we might best be able to serve them and how we might best be able to provide them the supplies or the resources necessary.
I think that's such a valuable point, Pastor Paul, that, when we have moved on in the news cycle, this is still reality for many, many, many people. And so talk to me, the floods are in the forefront of Canadians' minds now with a lot of calls for donations and supports, but the recovery needs go beyond the next coming weeks. What will those recovery needs and rebuilding processes look like? And how can we as Canadians support in the long run, in the long haul?
Well, I think, again, each community is probably a little bit different
Yep.
and unique to its own. Certainly, of course, we try to address the water concerns. And so conversations locally with local governments and with citizens will need to pick up. But I think in terms of what recovery will look like, yeah, the cleaning out, the cleaning up is going to be a tremendously big undertaking. And then for people to come back in and to really embrace the rebuilding. And I know that one of the things in High River that really encouraged us was having people come in that have a real heart and a passion for helping, a real desire to serve. I think any disaster brings out some of the best in people, and it can bring out some of the not so best in people. And when we found that there were builders and contractors who were not really seeking to honor people's needs or just respect the devastation all around us, including the personal struggles that we were experiencing, that was truly discouraging. So really encouraging people to be genuine and to be honest and to work with integrity, I think is super important. I think also creatively in terms of the community itself, thinking about new ideas about what it means to live into community. I know in High River, as churches, we came together and we found new ways to worship. We found new ways to reach out. I did serve on the Renew Committee in High River, together with World Renew, Habitat for Humanity, Mennonite Central, and Samaritan's Purse, where we just went door to door and we asked, how are you doing? Are your needs being met? Do you need anything? And it was great to hear people's stories and again, learn exactly what a family or an individual or a business might need and how we could respond to that. So I think, again, just hearing that personal story and understanding where people are at, and also just giving people space. Some of those stories will be uncomfortable, and learning the needs might be an uncomfortable conversation because people are vulnerable and they will be tired and they will be frustrated and they will be grieving. There's lots of mixed emotions, and just to embrace people with sensitivity and with patience.
Last question for you, Pastor Paul. Talk to me about the emotional, psychological, and spiritual toll in the aftermath of the flood, and how you saw, as being a pastor, just ministering to people as they lost everything.
Yeah, I think it's always different when, as a pastor or a leader, you're separated from the event. Of course, we were not separated. We were also part of the event, and we faced our own journey of loss. And in many ways, although that was difficult enough, I think it did help in terms of the reaching out, the identifying, just being comfortable with moments of emotion or quiet or stillness, because that's exactly what I was experiencing. And I think, it is really important to give people that time and that space. We go through different stages of grief, and also spiritually, we go through different phases. When we go out, we're just kind of anxious just to get back into our homes and back to our farms and back to our properties. And then when we get back, I think there's moments of hopeful optimism. And then once we see that it's going to be much longer, a real sense of discouragement and sometimes depression, and certainly anger sets in as well. And I remember just a few doors down from the High River Church building, one of our neighbors lost their home. And as we were just walking down the sidewalk, we were the people that got to hear the anger and the disappointment at that total loss and destruction. And that's uncomfortable, and yet that story needs to be heard. Those emotions need to be shared, and just a word of encouragement, assuring presence, I guess, is what's most important.
Pastor Paul Droogers, thank you so much for your time today. We continue to pray for all the people affected by the floods in BC. Crossroads Cares is partnering with Samaritan's Purse to help people on the ground. Go to crossroads.ca/BC for further information. Thank you again, Pastor Paul.
Thank you. My pleasure.